Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Thank you so much for joining us for another segment of Health Professional Radio. In this segment, we're going to be speaking with Jill Pellegrino. She's joining us here as Vice President of Recruitment and Real-World Evidence at CVS Health Clinical Trial Services to discuss how CVS Health is leveraging its many resources to develop comprehensive real-world data and real-world evidence that complement clinical findings, revealing deeper insights into health and safety outcomes, efficacy of treatments, and patient and physician behaviors. Welcome to Health Professional Radio, Jill Pellegrino. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this evening.
Great, thank you.
You are Vice President of Recruitment and Real-World Evidence there at CVS. Tell us a little bit more about your role at CVS Health Clinical Trial Services and a bit about yourself as well.
Sure. So first I'll explain about Clinical Trial Services. So this is a new endeavor for CVS Health. We formally launched this department in 2021. And we're focused on developing capabilities and solutions to address clinical research gaps. This includes patient recruitment solutions, trial delivery capabilities in our CVS Minute Clinics and in patient homes, and then last, real-world evidence solutions. Our primary mission is to increase clinical research access for all parties. In my role at CVS, I oversee the patient recruitment and real-world evidence areas, and I'm primarily focused on how we can use CVS's data to advance this mission. Prior to CVS, I spent 15 years in clinical research with my most recent position as General Manager at Accelerated Enrollment Solutions, which included a patient recruitment company and a global site network.
What is real-world evidence?
So in its most basic definition, real-world evidence uses data collected from a real-world setting. This is as opposed to a controlled setting like a clinical trial. Clinical trials primarily focus on efficacy and safety, but have limitations because the results are only representative of a very narrow subset of the population who will eventually receive the treatment. And this is due to trials having strict inclusion-exclusion criteria, as well as a chronic problem we see where only a very small subset of eligible patients ever get the opportunity to participate in trials. Real-world evidence studies help to inform the impact of treatments on a more comprehensive and representative patient sample.
So is it fair to say that real-world evidence is more useful or superior to that's collected in a controlled environment like a clinical trial?
I wouldn't say it's more superior. I would say it's an excellent supplement. Mm-hmm. Clinical trial data is very high quality in understanding the efficacy of the drug. Real-world evidence helps supplement that to better understand how it plays out in the real world across representative populations and more diverse populations. Real-world evidence can also help you understand additional data points that aren't just clinical. Specifically, when we think about what we're focusing on at CVS Health, we're trying to engage the patients directly in the real-world evidence studies. So we're collecting a lot of information about patients' behavioral data, their perceptions about the treatments and the disease, and how that's influencing why and how patients are taking certain treatments.
What resources does CVS Health have to enable that successful collection and utilization of that real-world evidence?
So as part of CVS Health, we have access to a unique data set that encapsulates patients' end-to-end journey. This is comprised of 100 million lives and includes data from multiple businesses, including our Aetna Health Plan, our Minute Clinics, EMR data, and our pharmacy data. So it's a very comprehensive data set that's capturing multiple data points across those 100 million lives. But what's most powerful about this data set is that we can engage the population directly and invite them to be active participants in research opportunities. This is different than traditional methods of collecting data for real-world evidence, which normally relies on de-identified data that's collected across different sources. So our ability to directly engage the patients in our database allows us to do a couple things differently. First, it allows us to obtain the patient's consent, which enables us to collect their data from multiple sources, which allows us to develop a more cohesive data set than patching aggregated data from different areas. Second, when the patient participates directly, we can gather deeper insights that help inform patients' perceptions and behaviors. The patient's voice is not something that's typically captured in medical records, so we're able to hear directly from patients about why or why not they're taking certain treatments. And then last, we have our clinical trial capabilities that we're building that allows us to run pragmatic real-world evidence studies that allows our customers to understand how an intervention, whether that's a pharmacological intervention, a device, or simply educational information, can impact both patients' and physicians' behaviors in the real world.
How does REW determine patterns of healthcare costs and resource utilization for patients?
Real-world evidence is very helpful in demonstrating actual behaviors in the real world that may be leading to what could be a preventable increase in healthcare costs. So I can share an example of a study where we saw this phenomenon, evidence study that we did. So we recently published a poster with Takeda at the AMC conference that showcased a retrospective study that we completed on patients who were diagnosed with ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, which is a chronic GI disease that affects the balance and leads to surgical emergencies due to complications. So the study evaluated treatments given, hospitalizations, and surgeries from those diagnosed. And we know in this disease that the recommendation is for patients to start treatment immediately upon diagnosis, and for that treatment to be more intensive when the patient is at high risk for a surgical emergency. What our study found is that an alarming portion of patients diagnosed were not seeking regular treatment. Instead, they were only treated during an event, such as a hospitalization. And we saw that this pattern exists in both patients that were deemed as low risk as well as high risk, so there was really no difference in severity of disease contributing to this behavior. So what this revealed is that healthcare costs for this population could be better managed if patients were adhering to the treatment guidelines and receiving regular treatment, as opposed to only seeking treatment in crisis situations, which results in higher costs. But, it also raised a lot of questions, such as why do we see this phenomenon? Is it a barrier that's preventing patients from seeking treatments, whether that's, healthcare access or cost? Is it impacting select populations more so than others? And, why are patients making this decision? So these are all questions that real-world evidence can help answer, especially when you engage the patients directly in the research.
Give us a website where we can learn more about CVS Clinical Trial Services.
Sure. We have two websites for that. It's cvsclinicaltrials.com and cvshealth.com.
And both of those are spelled just like they sound. CVS Clinical Trials, all one word.com, and CVS Health, all one word.com, correct?
Yes. I appreciate you taking the time, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share what we're doing at CVS Health.
Thank you so much, and hopefully you'll return.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard, in conversation with Jill Pellegrino. Audio copies of this program are available at hpr.fm and healthprofessionalradio.com.au. You can also subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, listen in, download at Anchor, Spotify, and be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com, Health Professional Radio.